Maybe
Oh,
I
there
see.
we go. There we go. We're live. It is pretty quick. So, hello, everyone. Happy whatever day it is. That's our new opening to
Yeah.
welcome to Leadership from the Heart today. Elizabeth, we're in for a real treat. I'm very, my heart is warm to know the conversation we're going to share with these two powerhouse. Not only are they powerhouse business women, but I'm really looking forward to diving into what Juliana and Avani are doing with their philanthropic efforts and the 100 Women Strong Foundation in Orlando. So, welcome, Juliana, and welcome, Avani.
Thank you. Hi.
Thank you both for joining us. Would you like to start off with sharing with us what is 100 Women Strong, a giving circle in Central Florida?
Sure, I'm happy to start. So 100 Women Strong is a giving circle, and we are an initiative under the Central Florida Foundation. And the Central Florida Foundation is the community foundation within Central Florida. So people hear the word giving circle, and what does that mean? Well, that's what it means. It's a group of women who come together and they give. And women have always been givers, and giving circles is nothing new. You know, when you think about bake sales and when you look for donations and so forth, that's kind of like a giving circle. But the interesting thing about 100 Women Strong is we call ourselves venture philanthropists. And so when you think about venture capitalists, what are they doing? You know, they're using their funds to have an impact on corporations. But what we're doing is we're using our funds to have a social impact. So we are venture philanthropists who focus on strategic philanthropy. So we're not check writers. We don't write checks based on things that tug on our heartstrings. We have this entire process that 100 Women Strong that focuses on data and evidence-based philanthropy that we focus on every year. And we've been doing it since the start in 2006.
That's pretty awesome. And when you're talking about philanthropy and nonprofits, I mean, you tug at my heartstrings because it's one of those things I love to give, and I'm very passionate about certain organizations and creating exposure and awareness. So tell us, kind of walk through that. Is it a membership? Is it how is it built up? How are you choosing the nonprofits you're supporting? What does that look like throughout the year? And I'm selfishly asking these questions because full transparency, I have some great friends here, Stephanie Tomko and Aspen Kralitch, who the three of us have been talking about doing this for months. And we've actually been putting things together to focus on that here in Austin and that initiative. So just like everybody else is going to be learning, I'm going to be soaking up all that knowledge and experience that you guys have to share.
You know, I'll give you a quick tidbit before I let Juliana talk a little bit about membership as well. But there is a national non-for-profit where 100 Women Strong is an affiliate of it. It's called Philanos. So think of philanthropy and then nos, and nos means us. So it means philanthropy and us. So philanos.org is actually a group of women's giving circles all throughout the United States that provide great resources that you can look into and see if there are any other giving circles in your area. But they also give you some great literature as well. So you don't have to start from scratch or recreate the wheel. And they actually have a conference every 18 months that the last one was in Seattle with 500 women who all have one passion, which is giving back to their community. So I think you would really enjoy that.
Love it.
Yeah, you'll love it. So I can tell you a little bit about membership, and then I'll hand it over to Juliana. But we are a membership, and everyone does come in with a donation. It's $1,100, and that $1,100, 98% of that goes back to the grant. And that grantee, is the one that's going to get most of the funds, and 98% is significant. And the process starts at the beginning of the year, and women can join throughout the year, and they'll just join the process wherever it is. But when I say we're strategic-based philanthropy, we're also a democracy. Every woman gets a vote within our giving circle. So we start off our year, which we start off around October, November, is we ask all the women to come to us and say, what are you passionate about? Are you passionate about 100 Women Strong only focuses on women and children's initiatives. So are you passionate about women and financial literacy? Are you passionate about prenatal care? Are you passionate about mental health. And we take all that information together and we put a survey together. And then that survey goes out to our membership and we say, what are the 2 or 3 themes that we can vote on? So we've had themes of, like I said, mental health, sexual violence, we've had homelessness and so forth. And once we've picked a theme as a membership, then we go through what we call our grants process. And our grants process is 7 to 8 months where we bring in experts from the field and we say, where is the gap related to this theme that we have? So if we're talking about mental health, is the gap in elementary school students? Are there red flags that we can identify in elementary school that's going to decrease potentially suicide rates in high school? So what is it? And so we get all of this information. And once we get this information, we find a project, something that we could do in 12 months or 24 months with the funds that we have. And it has to be a pilot study or a feasibility study, because at the end of the day, we want to see if this small project we do can have a large scalable impact. And then it also has to be strategic. It has to find and solve the core issue. So we don't go and we don't stock homeless shelters, for instance. It's a need that needs to be done. But what we say is if we can find the root cause of why there's been an increase in homelessness, that's going to be something maybe we won't have to stock homeless shelters in the next 5, 6, 7 years, right? Finding the root cause or finding the source problem is what we focus on. So that's our entire process. And it really takes, 12 months out of the year, and it's a growing process. But Juliana can tell you a little bit about, our membership and what our members do and how we get people involved.
Yeah, thank you so much. So Avani just summed up beautifully. She is the expert, really. I joined, almost 2.5 years ago. And the beauty, and I think my first question to Avani was, are we keeping most of the funds to go to grants, or is the organization, because that's really, we donate a lot. We're part of a local church. So we're heavy into philanthropy in our local market, I should say. But when it came to a different organization, that was a big worry to me because I didn't want the funds going to heavy staff. And anyway, so when she told me that 98% of the funds would go to the grants, that for me was a big deal. And having the ability to vote on topics and issues gave us, the women who are joining, really a voice and empowerment to be able to choose. Because at the end of the day, we are looking at issues at our local community, again, affecting women and children, but it's a very specific, localized, backed up by data. And that's also, if you look at the research process, it's just beautiful what they do. And I have one of my dear realtors as well who joined recently, and she only joined basically because of the thorough research process. She was in awe by all the data that's gathered. So I think going back to Avani's point of how do women join, of course, there's a common goal of how can we help the community, but also this realtor friend of mine, she joined because she loved that it's all data driven and backed up by actual numbers. So it's not only what you're feeling, because when we select the topics, it is something you see in the community. But at the end of the day, it has to be data driven so we can really see an optimal results for the initiative.
Can you share a little bit about your current initiative that you're focused on for 2020?
Sure. So our initiatives, so our 2020 initiatives, we make decisions in 2019. So our 2018, so we're a year. It takes us a year to identify what the initiative is, and then the next year is where our grant has gone. So I'll actually talk about 2 initiatives. The first one was called the Circle of Security, and it was so interesting because when we identified experts to come in, we wanted to talk about children, and we wanted to talk about literacy in children and controlling behavior in children. And these experts came in and they told us, right here in Orlando, Pine Hills has the most number of expulsions with children under the age of 5. How do you get expelled when you're 4 years old or when you're 3 years old? At the end of the day, expulsion, the child doesn't know what they're doing. I have a 6-year-old home who doesn't know what she's doing when I get upset with her. But it affects the mom, mostly anyone. It's because then the mom is out of work, right? When the child is ill, or is paying extra to find childcare. Or maybe then the child is at home and unfortunately not in the best care, right? So when we identified that, we actually went out and we said, what can we do to decrease the number of expulsions with these children under the age of 5? And Pine Hills, if you ever write down Pine Hills, that Pine Hills Road, it has 80 or 90 family-run daycares. And some of those, I've seen some are 24 hours. And so what we realized was, instead of seeing if we can have some type of program for the parents, because the children are actually at daycare probably more than they are at home. And so we did something really interesting. The Circle of Security was utilized, and I believe in the Pacific Northeast, at a drug rehabilitation center between parents and their children. But we decided to kind of take that and turn it around a bit. So we knew that it was a program that worked really well. But what if we took that program and we put it into the daycare and we taught this Circle of Security to the daycare workers? So the interesting thing about 100 Women Strong is when we grant, we don't grant to one non-for-profit. Our big goal is really collaboration between multiple non-for-profits that may have never worked together. And you would think non-for-profits would have a high level of collaboration, but it's not like that. It's most likely not like that in a lot of places. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to build, foster this sense of community related to philanthropy in Central Florida. So we were able to work with UCF, we were able to work with the Early Learning Coalition, and we were able to work with 2 independently run daycares disability studies for us. And we were able to go in and we were able to, teach these caregivers, but also everybody there. So the person who cooks for them, the person who's cleaning, and maybe the person who's part-time that comes in, about what is the Circle of Security. And you and I probably do this with our kids, sit them down, try to calm them down when they have an issue. Because when children are scared, they have fight or flight, right? They either fight, they act out, or they flight, they go into a corner and then they don't learn. These children, they were telling us, were having fight or flight almost 60% of their time because of, could be, abuse, it could be drug abuse, it could just be high levels of stress in the home. And so we taught these caregivers how to bring them, how to feel secure, right? Very simple things. We taught them these little things, and these children flourished. I mean, they went from children who were having behavioral issues, not wanting to learn, to I would go in, every 3-4 weeks and just see the caregivers, and these kids would just love you and hug you, and we're just so excited. But the positive impact that we didn't even know was going to happen is these children started learning better. They started reading better, and they started learning their alphabets, and they started learning their numbers better. So that was a feasibility study we did in a small area, 60 kids, or probably about 45 kids. And then the next year we expanded it to about 100 children. And that's what we focused on. So that's kind of one study that we did. The one that we're doing right now, we haven't figured out officially what our grant is, but it's mental health in adolescents. And that, it has affected everybody. If you think about mental health, it affects women and children everywhere, everything from postpartum depression to children having high stress, especially in this environment, right? Now we're seeing domestic violence is increasing during this pandemic because people are home, people have lost their jobs, homeschooling is not easy, and financial stress and so forth. So we're really excited about what our grant is going to be once we finalize it. But mental health is what we're going to work on.
When you chose the initiative for the mental health focus, I'm guessing you probably didn't realize we were about to encounter a pandemic, right? And so what a poetic moment to know that you're now going to focus on something that is absolutely critical.
That's
I mean,
right.
we focus a lot, even in our own household, about making sure we talk about mindset and making sure we talk about allowing emotions to process through. And it's okay to be mad sometimes, but I can't even imagine the struggles that some might be having when they're having a difficult environment at home. So that's really, really great for you all to focus on.
That's one of my biggest conversations with people is what's that going to look like coming out of this? Because a lot of us have our security and our safety. And just to your point, the children that were being studied, right? They were doing better once they had that security, once they had that safety, once they had that acceptance and that confidence. I know what you're experiencing and what you're describing, because I grew up in a foster family, and my family and my parents, we took in high risk cases. So we had 180 foster kids over 20 years. And my mom has written a book, and over time, and now that I'm older and I'm a mother, I see when you have those environments that change and the children feel secure and they're not in that fight or flight mentality, it completely changes their world. And when you're talking about all these kids being expelled that young, it just breaks my heart, because they just don't know any better. And I keep thinking, what environment have they been in, right? And how can we make that better? So one of the things I keep thinking about in this pandemic are the children, are the schools. Like, a lot of these kids, at least in our area, that's where they get their meals. That's where they get their safety. That's where they get their security. And now they don't have that. And so I agree with you, Renee. I think the mental health is going to be huge. And I love the fact that you didn't even know that was the initiative that was going to be so powerful in the coming months, weeks, days, what have you. But yeah, it's something that's on my mind a lot, because I feel helpless in that realm. I want to go and help everybody I can. We just, how can you do that? So the collective effort that you guys are putting forth is pretty awesome.
On the topic of the pandemic, what have you experienced so far, or would you like to give a little bit of thought around how the pandemic might even affect your philanthropic efforts or the foundation's efforts as you move forward?
Sure. Well, I'm really excited about a few things that the Central Florida Foundation is doing. So every, I believe it's Tuesday, don't quote me, but they're having a call. You can go onto the Central Florida Foundation website to talk about the community and COVID-related issues, and who in the community and what non-for-profits really need your help. So that's great. From a Giving Circle perspective, of course, we always are concerned, as all non-for-profits probably are during tough and difficult times, is, are we going to lose a lot of our funding, and are we going to lose a lot of our donors and supporters? And so far, we have been very lucky. We haven't seen that, but we have to also make sure that we can support the community when the community needs it. And this is probably the biggest, at least in my lifetime. I can't think of any other issue where we've said philanthropy is going to be so important. We talk about things of intersection of philanthropy and politics, but this is the first time we're seeing a significant intersection between philanthropy and medicine, right? And you wouldn't think, and this is the first time we're seeing people who are putting the Gates Foundation, for instance, it's putting millions and millions of dollars to help find a vaccine out there. And several organizations have come out, Apple and Microsoft, saying we're going to put money to COVID-19. This is, again, the first time in history where you're seeing that intersection between philanthropy and medicine, and philanthropy and large corporations. And you're going to start seeing that here too. I've seen a lot of GoFundMe's recently where saying, how can we collectively help as a community for our fellow entrepreneurs and our fellow non-for-profits. So this is the perfect time, I think, to get involved. And if you want to make an impact, and how do you make the biggest impact in your community, it's really through collective, right? My funds alone can fund something and make a slight impact. But if I could get 100 women together, or 200 women, or even better, 1,000 women together, all focusing on one initiative, it's not just the funds, but that brain power and that passion and that excitement that women bring to the table. It's just invaluable.
Yeah, I agree.
What are some of the roadblocks or the hurdles that you guys had to overcome while launching this initiative? Because this is, what I'm talking about, we're doing, it's on a smaller scale. What it sounds like you guys are doing, there's a lot that goes into it. And you're talking about having your plan set out a year in advance. So there's a lot of moving parts. What are some of the hurdles or the roadblocks that you didn't expect? How did you overcome them? If you were to look back and redo it again, what would you change, if anything?
I think some of the hurdles would be, we are a completely volunteer-run organization. So when you have several women who have competing priorities, families, work, right, social life, and then philanthropy. So I think that's hard. But I was co-chair for 2.5, 3 years. And I was just so blessed to have so many passionate women who wanted to join. So I would say that's one hurdle, is when you have just a volunteer run organization. But I would say really it's, finding a theme that makes everybody happy. We've been really lucky because we have come to a consensus year after year, but we're still small. We're about 90 women. I think, I know I'm not answering your question about the past, but I think in the future, what I am worried about is once you get to 1,000 women,
Yeah.
are in the US, is how do you identify a theme that all women are happy with, right? So we've seen some really interesting things. There's other giving circles called the Impact 100s, and what they do is every $100,000 they have a separate grant. So if you do have 800 women, you have 8 different grants that are out there, and that's really exciting because when I think about those 3 topics that we were looking at in 2019, mental illness, mental health, sexual harassment, and literacy, we could have done all those 3, if we had 300 women that were involved. So growth has been a challenge for us. You would think a community like Orlando, we could grow quickly, but like I said, we haven't hit 100 women yet. And I don't know. I don't know if it's because, again, we're a volunteer run organization. We're not all great marketers or anything, but, growth has always been difficult for us. But when I came on board in 2013, we were 17 women. So we
Wow.
go 17 to, mid 90s in I guess 6-7 years. So
If I may add, I'm sorry,
you,
there's a delay on my thing. Sorry. If
Go
I may add
right
one
ahead.
thing to Avani's point, is that if you have a champion, and usually the chair or co-chair will be your champion for the organization as far as the leader. So I know Avani for her 3 years was and has been and continues to be a very strong advocate for 100 Women Strong. So I think having that, and also one thing that I think we do encounter, and we continue to encounter, and we're trying to overcome that, is when women join, a lot of them are okay with giving the funds, but they want to know, what do I have to do? Am I going to commit 20 hours a week, 10 hours a week,
Yeah.
2 hours a month, whatever that is, with all the committees and the work. So it was, for us, we have been working on a packet. So the women know, if you would like to join this committee, this is what you should expect. If you would like to just volunteer for specific events, this is what you expect. If you would like just to donate funds, that's great. So those are things that I think it's important to set up the expectation from the beginning, and then women know what to expect and how much they would like to give as an overall.
I remember, Avani, when you first came on as co-chair, and you said it was 2017. It feels like it was a minute ago. It's crazy how time flies. But those 17 women, to hear that you've grown now to a foundation of 90 women in that short amount of time, I think you're being modest, because I know how much you pour in, and wow, that's so great that you've evolved the foundation to that level. Pat yourself on the back as an organization, because that's pretty phenomenal.
No, we're really excited about it. And not only that, that's women who have become members. We have so many other women who are get involved. We have something called Good Work Socials, where we pack bags for Arnold Palmer Medical Center during Halloween, because there's over 300 kids who can't leave the hospital to go trick-or-treating, something that we probably take for granted with our children. So we have hundreds of women and their children who come in to help us. So it's not only our members, but it's the community who has helped us to get to our goals in multiple ways, and who have helped our grantees as well.
Avani, you just mentioned the Halloween bags for the hospital. That is a really good segue to another thing I know about the two of you, is how you involve your families. We're all moms on this panel, right? And so I think it's very inspirational when I know women who are involving, they're not only putting effort into their philanthropic passion, but they're involving their kids, which I know you both do. And when you mention the packing the bags for Halloween for the hospital, I've been a part of that. But what's really cool is you invite all the kids as well. So I'm not sure who has more fun, myself or the kids, because the kids get to help, and it's a huge assembly line. And it's amazing how much can be accomplished in a very short amount of time. Can we talk a little bit about maybe your thoughts or your tips on how you continue to bring the kids into your passion with what you dedicate in your philanthropic effort? Both of you. I want to hear from both of you.
I can tell you, like I said, the Halloween packing is a highlight for my kids and for me on an annual basis. But, I always say, what do I want my legacy to be? It's not the things that I can leave my children or the things that I can leave my company or, my family. It's really, how can I change my community, that small part of the map that we put our roots down in. And I want my children to know that. And the only way that I can really leave that legacy is to pass that along to them. And I can tell you, my children grew up in a bubble. They didn't grow up the way that I grew up. I grew up with, government assistance and my parents not knowing, what, if we're able to pay the next month's utilities and so forth, because they immigrated from another country with $20 and a degree that really didn't work in the US, right? So I feel like I had that grit and that scared sense of, I have to work hard to make sure that, I can change that life for my children. Unfortunately, my children have iPads and can go wherever they want to go. And so how do you really instill that in them? And the only way you really, for me, I've realized is opening their eyes to that our little community here isn't the way that the world is. So I take them to the daycares and, we take them to soup kitchens and we take them to the hospital to say, you're not only do you have an obligation, don't think of it as an obligation, think of it as an opportunity to help these families, these kids and so forth. And I think the best story is I would take my son to the daycare to read to them, to the children. And after the second or third time, kids all like hugged him and they were just so excited. And he was about maybe 7.5 or 8 years old. And we were in the car and he was like, Mom, you know what? I know what superheroes feel like. And I stopped for a second and I was like, yeah. He really does allow children to feel like they're superheroes, right? And at that minute, I knew that I was making a little philanthropist. And so that's what I realized is, just constantly show them how they can make a difference. And it's good for confidence and it's good for being an altruist and it's, good for kind of leaving your legacy. And that's really what we can do. And, anytime that I can get them involved in the community, I get them involved in the community. And even if it's difficult decision or difficult conversations about homelessness, that, I took them to an abuse shelter, a domestic abuse shelter. We helped with the domestic abuse shelter, and they didn't realize they're like parents or caregivers, hurt children. And having that conversation isn't easy, when you have a 5-6-year-old. But you have to educate them. And so that's kind of been our mantra in the house is, we'll show you what there is, and then you tell us, how can we help them?
True.
That's very similar to what we do in our household as well. We're teaching empathy and passion and being passionate. And my kids are in a bubble as well, right? But I include them in all of our charitable activities. I'm on a lot of boards. I'm involved in a lot of stuff, and I bring them along with me. I mean, one thing that was pretty telling is we went to Vancouver. We don't do material things. We decided a long time ago that Christmas and holidays and stuff, we don't need stuff, right? So instead, let's create memories. Let's do a family vacation. So we always plan our big family vacation in lieu of gifts, and we all plan it, and it's a big deal. Well, one of our trips last year happened to be going to Vancouver, and we always go to places we've never been. And one of my clients said, "Have you ever been to Vancouver?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, it's gorgeous," and they were talking about all these beautiful things, but they said, "Stay away from Skid Row." And I was like, "Tell me about that." He was like, "Well, there's an area," and they told me exactly what areas, what streets, to the T. Stay away from this. It's probably one of the hardest, most drug abused, most homeless, like just rock bottom you will ever see. And he was like, "You need to keep your children away from that." I said, "Okay." And as soon as I got home, I told my husband, I was like, "Hi, we're going over here when we're in Vancouver." And we took our kids there. And it was very eye-opening because being in that bubble, they don't know. And yeah, they're children, but at the same time, I think it's healthy to have those conversations. And it created, and my little 8-year-old still talks about that. "Mom, you remember that man that we saw?" right? And there's so many times that it allows for conversations here back at home. And I think we don't have to keep them in a bubble. We don't have to throw them into the ugliness of the world, and we can still keep them as children, right? But creating that legacy, creating great people that give back to our community, creating great teenagers that give back and help the smaller ones and adults. That's really what our family is focused on. And I love that you bring yours right along as well.
Yeah, for us has always been, I don't want my kids to feel guilty about being where they're at, but at the same time, how can we empower them to be better? I grew up in Brazil, in a very, very good community, but literally next door, we're talking about New York City. São Paulo is like the bigger than New York. So you have a great, beautiful neighborhood, and then next to it, it's something really bad. So I grew up watching that, even though you are in a great area, but you grow up seeing that. So you see poverty, you see people on the street, people asking. So naturally, you know that there are different people that you need to help. You need to do something for the community. To be honest, in the US in general, you're not exposed to that in that type of environment. So like what Avani said, just bringing, and you also, Elizabeth, bringing them to the efforts and to instill in them the desire to help others without the consequence of, I'm going to do this because it makes me feel so good. No, you do this regardless of if it makes you feel good or not. It is good for the community. So what we do also, and it's a big thing for me, we send money to missionaries in Africa? Yes. To Nepal? Yes. But how can I help my neighbor literally next door who I know lost his job because of Disney? So what do? Let's cook. Let's do something. That's something I love to do. So let's cook, let's bake a cake. Let's take it next door. I mean, we wrap it around and make sure it's safe. But at the same time.
Do you deliver, Juliana? Can you please send some over here too?
I've been like on a delivery streak with everything, quiches, and, because I know some people, they just, at the end of the day, we need whatever makes sense to you. I think that's what matters, for them to have a feel of your neighbor and what are they in need for. We delivered on their little truck toilet paper in the end of beginning of third week of March. We were delivering toilet paper. I know that was scarce, and we had, because of our business, we had a bunch. So we delivered like 2 rolls of toilet paper to our neighbors. And they did, the kids, I was just with them. So little things, but I think it makes a huge difference to them growing up.
I love that. One thing that I tell my kids often is philanthropy is not about money. It's about time, treasure, and talent, right? Yeah. So giving your time, treasure, which is money, but also your talent, what are you good at? And if you can kind of instill that in your children, because there have been so many times when I've talked to young women, when I ask if they want to join 100 Women Strong, they say, gosh, I don't have the money for it. Or, I'm not a philanthropist. What's a philanthropist? But a philanthropist is anybody who, can make an impact in their community with time, treasure, talent. And that's really important to teach at a very young age, that, philanthropists just aren't people who have a lot of money to give, right? It's people who care about their community and in some way want to impact it.
Well, when we're talking about leadership in these calls and with these different people all the time, and we're having these great leaders on that are being leaders in their own right in their community, right? It's not, a friend of ours wrote a book years ago called It's Not a Title, right? So you don't have to have a title to be a leader. And what you are saying, and we absolutely all agree, is you're being leaders within your community and you're helping others, but you're also growing leaders in your children, right? You're showing them what leadership is. They're watching our movements. Even if we're not talking to them directly, they're watching. And so for me, that's what's so powerful. It's like, okay, I want to be a leader in my community. That doesn't have to be, that doesn't fit in a box. And I want my children to grow up to be leaders in the way, because that's what we're all going to do to be successful in a bigger way, and helping the globe and our community and our families and our neighbors. So I love that we're all leaders in our own right, but our children are going to be leaders because they're watching us as we take it day by day.
That's right. Yeah.
I was really impressed to learn something new about 100 Women Strong. Avani, I've never known this part of the foundation, is that the focus is really getting at the root cause to come from solution orientation, and the amount of attention that goes into understanding the data and research, that's a different model for a foundation. And that is really interesting. I also think that lends itself to what you're saying about time, treasure, or talent, is to not be apprehensive to get involved if you're feeling like perhaps I don't have the monetary ability to contribute, is that there is a lot of other effort that could be contributed toward understanding and researching and the initiative in other ways. So I'm really impressed about that element. It's, like you said, stocking shelves and any kind of need for food, that's great. There is a need for it. But if we could get to the cause of understanding why the need exists, that's an entirely different mindset.
That's
and
right.
That's really impressive. And it's a different way, I think, for foundations should be inspired to think.
Yeah.
It almost feels like sometimes it feels easier for foundations to say, here's the money to the issue right now. Let's put money on it. And you all are coming together to say, how do we come from solution orientation?
Yeah. I feel like 100 Women Strong really disrupted the giving circle process. Before, there was times where we call it retail philanthropy, for instance, where, maybe you get a bunch of RFPs to come in and say, okay, well, we like your Shark Tank type of presentation, we're going to write you a check. And, those are needed. I'm not going to say that that's not needed, but this all really kind of started when I heard this story from Mark Brewer, who's the CEO of the Central Florida Foundation. And he said there was a story of, a man, and there was babies coming down the stream, and there was babies and babies and babies coming down the stream. So this man called all the villagers to come and say, grab these babies so we can save the babies. But then there was one man who said, well, why don't we go up the stream and see why the babies are coming down anyway, right? And so that's really what we do. We go up the stream and see what the issue is, solve that primary issue, so then we can solve all the secondary issues. I mean, that's the secondary issues are going to be easy once you get to that root problem or that root cause. And that's really been enlightening to me, not from only a philanthropy perspective, but that's how we should really look at all problems, right? If you can get to that, your time, treasure, and talent is going to be, you have a bigger bang for your buck, or what we call, a bigger return on social impact, for instance. And it's harder. For instance, it takes 8-9 months to go through the process to find the root cause and then figure out this feasibility study, with a high chance of you might fail, and you might fail again, and you might fail again. Instead of writing a check for, a new capital expenditure, like a building, for instance. So, but yeah, it's innovative, it's different. And, the other thing I should have mentioned with 100 Women Strong is we have a twofold mission. One is helping women and children in the community, but two is building strategic philanthropists and teaching women how to be philanthropists. And this process that we do really teaches women how to be philanthropists. And a lot of people don't know, but 2020, this decade is going to start the first decade ever in history where the transfer of wealth is going to go from men to women. So now more women this decade will actually hold more money than men do. And it could be multiple reasons, right? More women are breadwinners and going into the workforce and getting educated, death of a spouse or divorces, whatever the reason is, but that transfer of wealth is coming there. So it is so key, especially in our community, to make sure that we can educate women on the impact that they can make with their funds, both from a regular wealth perspective, but also from a philanthropy perspective.
How are you finding the organizations? Are they finding you? Are they submitting requests? Is it twofold where you're saying, hey, we really like what your mission is? What are you doing for outreach in that regard and letting people know about what your missions are and how you can help?
So it is interesting. So this is where our Central Florida Foundation is a key player and a key partner for us. So the Central Florida Foundation has some really deep roots within the community and really knows the experts. So we will work with the Central Florida Foundation when we've identified a theme. So if our theme is, literacy in children between 0 and 5, we will go to the foundation and say, can you bring us a group of experts on a monthly basis to talk to us about it? So it could be non-for-profits, it could be individuals in academia, it could be, someone who's on the school board, it's going to be a bunch of very diverse experts that come to the field just to give us data. This is all really just pulling in data. And then after every one of these, what we call that we have with the experts, we kind of go back and say, did we hear any tidbits here of things that were interesting that they're working on that they can solve? And that's where we talk about the collaboration, bringing in multiple groups in here, because typically one organization isn't going to have that perfect solution, right? You're going to need multiple people. So when we did the Circle of Security, UCF had PhD students. Dr. Rank was an expert when it came to Circle of Security, but we needed someone to tell us where are we going to see the lowest attrition when it comes to a childcare facility, because we can't have attrition at a childcare facility if we're going to be teaching them something really important and then identifying what the data is, right? So that's where the Early Learning Coalition came in. And then we were able to identify 2 family-run daycares. And so we had to get multiple people involved in this to really have that perfect project.
I like that it's across the board, so it's not all the, lack of a better word, the big guys who get all the, the awareness and the finances and the attention, if you will. I like that you guys are looking across the board and saying, how does this fit in with what our theme is and how can we help? So it's a little bit more of an even playing field. That's pretty cool.
I'm curious, before we wrap, what Juliana and Avani what are one of the things you're most proud of in what you've grown throughout your time with 100 Women Strong? Juliana, you want to go first? I'm putting you on the spot.
I feel very privileged to be amongst these amazing women, and I learn every single day. With every single day is an exaggeration, but I learn every time we're together, either on a leadership call or at an event. So I've been learning the beauty of philanthropy. So like Avani said, I come with a very specific background in philanthropy, more not data driven, more heart based, and that's how I grew up, which is great to have that aspect as well. But when I joined, I started seeing the other side of things, and that we could be, I loved when strategic, venture philanthropists, those are all big words, but they all made sense to me. And for me, I would say I feel very proud and privileged to be able to understand. So I do think that I am a product, a little bit of a product of what Avani described, of a more strategic philanthropist.
That's fantastic. And that also speaks to the cascading effect that will happen throughout the community as you and the organization is focused on sharpening both the members and their knowledge around philanthropy, but also the initiatives and how that impacts and how that cascades out. So it's very inspiring. Avani, I can't wait to hear. What is one of the things you're most proud of?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off what Juliana said. It's very hard to put a group of 90 diverse women, and I'm talking about diverse backgrounds, socially, culturally, politically, age. I mean, our youngest is 22 and our oldest is 99, right? You put a group of women together who have come from different aspects of life and who are very different, right? But at the same time, we have this one core objective and value that we are faced is that we adhere to, which is changing the life of children and women in this community, and how we come together and how we have become friends and how we become teachers and mentors and mentees and students of really each other is just so exciting. And having that relationship, the impact that we make to the community is phenomenal. So when I get to go back to the daycare, or when I get to go back and talk to some students that I've met through 100 Women Strong and seeing how far they've come, I kind of reflect on they have allowed us to do this, right? We are philanthropists and they are, the grantees, but is it really that way? How much they've taught us during this process and how much we have grown as a community is so, it's awesome and it's special. And I'm so glad that we have a group of women like this in our community who is forward thinking and innovative and disruptive, that we can really make these changes and that we can think past the the tugging at the heartstrings and saying, how are we going to use these funds that we have, being conservative fiscally, but then also making sure that it's going to have the biggest impact. So sometimes risks, right? We don't stay in the line, and that's not what this group does. 100 Women Strong, we don't stay in the line, and that's really exciting.
I love that. Elizabeth, I was sharing with you, I said, just wait, this is going to be a good one. I think I had goosebumps about 10 times throughout our time together today, because you guys were really, you're tugging at my heart today.
I love I love this. I love learning, because everybody wants to do well and help others, right? And I love creatively brainstorming and understanding what other people are doing that's going well, or what challenges or what changes or what they would do differently. Because at the end of the day, the more people we're all able to help, and collectively, whatever the organization is, but the more people we're able to help, the world's just a better place. And I think everybody's recognizing that in the current situation with the pandemic. We keep saying this. I really hope and pray that people are going to come out of here softer, more patient, more kind. And I think, and I'm hoping that more people are going to want to help others that are in a very disadvantaged situation, whether it's because of the pandemic or a situation before that. I think they'll be kinder and gentler and be more willing to lend a hand. And so I love what you guys are doing out there. Like I said, there's something similar we're starting to work on our end here, but it's great people coming together for great results.
For those who are interested in learning more, can you share, Avani, how 100 Women Strong can be contacted and found online?
Sure. I should have had. So you can go to the Central Florida Foundation website and go under initiatives, and you'll see 100 Women Strong under the initiatives. And you can read about, our two new co-chairs. You can read about our past grantees. If you are impassioned and you would like to join us, you can go to donate or reach out to anybody at the Central Florida Foundation, and we can get you the right information. But also joining the Central Florida Foundation on their weekly talks is great to learn more about the community and to learn about how you can get involved and really kind of where the needs are if you're not ready to join the Giving Circle.
And I did not know about the weekly talks. Yeah. You can count me in on that. I will be there.
Wonderful. I'll send them over to you.
We'll make sure everything's tagged here in our posts. And thank you so much for carving time out. Again, this is a panel of moms here, and I know how busy you all are. So thank you both, Juliana and Avani. We appreciate you, and thank you for all the work you do to pour into this community.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Bye,
ladies. Take care. Bye-bye.